I was standing in the school parking lot, my phone pressed so hard against my ear that it hurt, when the principal's words finally broke through my panic. "Mrs. Henderson, your mother-in-law picked up Leo an hour ago. She said you were in a car accident and gave her permission." The world tilted sideways. I hadn't been in any accident. I hadn't given anyone permission. And Eleanor, my ex-mother-in-law, had just taken my 6-year-old son. My hands shook so violently, I could barely dial her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail, I tried again, and again, nothing. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. And Eleanor had just fired the shot that would either destroy me or force me to fight back with everything I had. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever dealt with a toxic family member who seemed perfect to everyone else but made your life hell, behind closed doors, hit that like button. Subscribe because this story gets darker before it gets better, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 3 months earlier, my life looked nothing like the disaster it was about to become. I had a small but cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a job at a local marketing firm that paid the bills, and most importantly, I had Leo. My beautiful, sweet boy with his father's dark curls, and thank God none of his father's cruelty. Mark and I had been divorced for 2 years by then, and I'd worked hard to build a stable life for my son. Just the 2 of us against the world, or so I thought. Eleanor Brooks was a force of nature in our town. She sat on the school board, chaired 3 different charity committees, and had a reputation as a pillar of the community. Everyone knew her. Everyone respected her. Everyone except me, because I knew what she really was. I'd known since the day Mark first brought me home to meet his family 10 years ago, when she'd looked me up and down with those cold gray eyes and said, "Well, Mark, she's certainly different from what I imagined for you." The smile never reached her eyes. But I'd married Mark anyway, believing love could overcome anything. I was 23 and stupid enough to think I could win her over. For 8 years, I tried. I swallowed every backhanded compliment, every criticism disguised as concern, every deliberate slight at family gatherings. When she bought Mark expensive gifts but forgot my birthday, I smiled. When she undermined my parenting decisions, I stayed quiet. When she made jokes about my modest upbringing at dinner parties, I laughed along. I told myself it was the price of family harmony. The divorce changed things. Mark had cheated on me with someone from his office, someone whose family Eleanor approved of, and yet somehow I was the villain in her story. She'd stood by her son through everything, never once asking if I was okay. Never once considering that maybe, just maybe, Mark was the one who'd destroyed our family. After the divorce was finalized, I thought I'd finally be free of her. But I'd forgotten the most important thing. She still had a connection to me through Leo, and Eleanor never let go of anything she considered hers. The first few months after the divorce, she was relatively quiet. She'd see Leo every other weekend when he stayed with Mark, and I was grateful for the distance. But then Mark got engaged to Jennifer, the woman he'd cheated with, and suddenly Eleanor's attention swung back to me with terrifying intensity. She started dropping by unannounced, always with some excuse about wanting to spend time with her grandson, or bringing him a little something. Each visit left me feeling smaller, more inadequate, more wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when everything shattered. I remember it was Tuesday because Leo had art class that day, and he'd been so excited to show me his painting of our family. Just him and me holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Eleanor showed up at 5:30 dressed in one of her expensive pantsuits, her silver hair perfectly styled. She didn't knock, just used the spare key I'd stupidly given her for emergencies months ago. "Sarah, darling," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she let herself in. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by to see my grandson. Leo was on the living room floor, surrounded by his action figures acting out some elaborate story. Only he understood. When he heard the door, he looked up and smiled. "Hi," he said brightly, the way any 6-year-old would greet a familiar face. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her expression transforming from fake pleasantness to something cold and terrible. She walked slowly toward Leo, her heels clicking ominously on the hardwood floor. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, but something in the quality of the silence made me freeze. "What did you just say to me?" Eleanor's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Hi," Leo repeated, confused, now his smile fading. "I am your grandmother. You will address me with respect." She reached up and unpinned the brooch she always wore on her lapel, an antique silver piece shaped like a rose that had belonged to her mother. It was her most prized possession, the one she wore to every important event, the one she told Mark would be passed down through the family. She held it in her hand, examining it as if seeing it for the first time. I started moving toward them, my heart beginning to race. "Eleanor, he's just a child. He didn't mean—" "Respect is not optional, Sarah. It's clearly something you failed to teach him." Before I could process what was happening, she reached down and grabbed Leo's arm. He yelped in surprise, and then in pain as she dragged the sharp edge of the brooch across his forearm. It wasn't a deep cut, but it was deliberate, calculated to hurt, without causing serious injury. Blood welled up in a thin red line. The scream that tore from my throat didn't sound human. I lunged forward, shoving Eleanor back and scooping Leo into my arms. He was crying, confused and terrified, clutching his arm. The cut wasn't long, maybe 2 inches, but it was bleeding and my baby was hurt, and this woman, this monster, had done it on purpose. "Get out!" My voice shook with a rage I'd never felt before. "Get out of my house right now." Eleanor straightened her jacket, completely calm, as if she'd just had a pleasant conversation about the weather. "You're making a scene, Sarah." "I was simply teaching him a lesson about respect, something his mother clearly can't do." She pinned the brooch back onto her jacket, and I saw a small smear of my son's blood on the silver. "You will regret this moment of hysteria. Mark needs to know what kind of environment his son is living in, what kind of unstable mother you've become." I said, "Get out." I was shaking, still holding Leo, who was sobbing into my shoulder. Eleanor smiled, then a thin, cruel smile that made my blood run cold. "You think you can raise him alone? You think you have that right? Family is everything, Sarah. And you're about to learn exactly what that means." She walked to the door, paused and looked back. "I'll see you soon, dear. Very soon." The moment the door closed behind her, I collapsed onto the couch, rocking Leo, whispering that everything was okay, even though we both knew it wasn't. I cleaned his cut with shaking hands, applied antibiotic ointment, and covered it with a bandage featuring his favorite superhero. But no bandage could cover what had just happened. No ointment could heal the violation of safety we both felt. I should have called the police. I should have documented everything, taken photos, filed a report. But I was in shock, and some small damaged part of me, the part that had been conditioned by years of Eleanor's manipulation, whispered that maybe no one would believe me. She was Eleanor Brooks' respected community member. I was Sarah Henderson, the bitter ex-wife. Who would they believe? That night, after I'd finally gotten Leo to sleep, curled up beside me in my bed, because he was too scared to be alone, my phone rang. Mark's name flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped. "What the hell is wrong with you?" His voice was pure venom. "My mother calls me in tears, saying you attacked her, that you're having some kind of breakdown, that Leo isn't safe with you. That's not what happened. Mark, she hurt him. She cut him with her brooch because he didn't call her grandmother. I have proof there's a mark on his arm." "You're delusional. My mother would never hurt Leo. She adores him. You, on the other hand, have clearly lost your mind. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. If you can't provide a stable environment for my son, then maybe he needs to live with someone who can." "You can't be serious. Mark, I'm telling you the truth. My mother is a saint who's put up with your disrespect for years. And now you're dragging Leo into your drama. I won't let you damage my son the way you tried to damage my family." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there in the dark, listening to Leo's soft breathing, and realized that Eleanor had planned this perfectly. She'd hurt Leo just enough to make her point, but in a way that could be explained away. Then she'd spun the story, making herself the victim and me the aggressor. And Mark, who'd never stood up to his mother a day in his life, had fallen for it completely. The next morning, I found the first package on my doorstep. A basket wrapped in cellophane with a cheerful bow filled with books. I opened it with trembling hands and saw the titles. Managing Your Anger as a Parent. Emotional Regulation for Single Mothers. When Parenting Feels Overwhelming. Tucked inside was a note in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "Thought these might help. We all need support sometimes. Love, Eleanor." I threw the entire basket in the trash, but it was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, packages kept arriving. Brochures for anger management classes. Information about therapists who specialized in parenting challenges. A magazine article about the dangers of parental stress, with certain passages highlighted in yellow. Each delivery was like a little knife wound, small enough not to kill, but painful enough to weaken. Then came the flowers. A massive arrangement delivered to my office, the kind you send to funerals. White lilies and chrysanthemums, their sickly sweet smell filling the small space. The card read, "In memory of the respect that once existed in our family. Perhaps it can be resurrected. Eleanor." My coworkers thought it was strange but sweet that my former mother-in-law was trying to maintain a relationship. They didn't see the threat in every word, the careful construction of a narrative where I was unstable and she was the concerned matriarch trying to help. I wanted to scream at them that this was psychological warfare, but how could I explain without sounding exactly as crazy as Eleanor wanted me to appear? Through it all, I tried to maintain normalcy for Leo. I took him to school, picked him up, made his favorite dinners, read him bedtime stories. But he was different now, more anxious, more quiet. He'd flinch at sudden movements. He'd stop talking about his grandmother even when he came home from weekends at Mark's house. When I asked him about it, he'd just shrug and say everything was fine, but his eyes told a different story. I didn't know that the worst was yet to come. I didn't know that Eleanor had been laying groundwork, making phone calls, positioning her pieces on the chessboard. I was so focused on protecting Leo from her next visit that I didn't see the real attack coming until it was too late. It was a Thursday in October, one of those perfect fall days where the leaves were just starting to turn, and the air had that crisp bite that promised winter was coming. I'd had a good morning at work, actually felt like maybe we were going to be okay, like maybe Eleanor would get bored with her campaign and move on to tormenting someone else. I should have known better. My phone rang at 12:30, the school's main number. My heart sank before I even answered. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Principal Morrison. I wanted to let you know that Leo has been picked up early today." The words didn't make sense. Picked up by who I didn't authorize anyone to. His grandmother came in about an hour ago. She had documentation that you'd been in a car accident and were at County General. She was quite distressed, actually, and we felt it was best to release Leo to family rather than keep him here upset and worried about his mother. The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. "I haven't been in any accident. I'm at work. I never gave her permission to pick him up." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Henderson, are you saying Mrs. Brooks lied to us?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Where did she take him? Did she say where they were going?" "She said she was taking him to her home until she heard from you. Mrs. Henderson, if this is some kind of custody dispute, we can't be put in the middle." I hung up and immediately tried Eleanor's cell, straight to voicemail. I tried the house line. No answer. I grabbed my purse and keys, told my confused boss I had an emergency, and ran to my car. The drive to Eleanor's estate on the other side of town took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. My mind raced through terrible scenarios. Would she hurt him again? Was she planning to take him somewhere I couldn't find them? Had Mark known about this? Eleanor's house was a sprawling Victorian mansion, set back from the road, surrounded by manicured gardens and a wrought iron fence. I'd always hated this place with its cold perfection and rooms that felt more like museum displays than spaces where people actually lived. The gate was closed. I pressed the intercom button over and over, my fingers shaking. "Yes." Eleanor's voice, calm and amused, crackled through the speaker. "Open this gate right now. I'm here for my son." "Sarah, dear, you sound so agitated. Are you sure you should be driving? The school said you'd been in an accident." "You know damn well I wasn't in any accident. Let me in or I'm calling the police." "The gate's unlocked, darling. Do come in." I shoved the gate open and ran up the long driveway. The front door opened before I reached it, and there was Eleanor dressed like she was about to host a garden party. Her expression one of mild concern mixed with condescension. "Where is he?" I pushed past her into the foyer. "Leo is perfectly safe. He's in the sitting room watching television." "Really, Sarah, you're acting quite erratic." I found him exactly where she said, sitting on the pristine white sofa that no one was ever allowed to sit on, his small body rigid, his eyes fixed on the TV, but clearly not seeing it. "Leo?" He turned and the relief in his face broke my heart. He jumped up and ran to me, and I held him so tight I probably hurt him, but I couldn't let go. "Are you okay? Did she hurt you? Are you okay?" I checked him over frantically, looking for new injuries. "I'm okay, Mom. I was scared. She said you were hurt and I had to come here, but I didn't want to. I wanted to stay at school." Eleanor stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "See how he clings to you. That kind of anxiety in a child is a sign of instability in the home environment. I was simply providing a safe, calm space until we could sort out what's really going on with you, Sarah. Nothing is going on with me except that you committed kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" She laughed, a tinkling sound that made me want to scream. I'm his grandmother. I picked him up from school because I was told his mother was in an accident. Any reasonable person would do the same. It's not my fault the school gave me incorrect information." Her eyes glittered with malice. "But I do have to wonder why you're so defensive. Why you immediately assume the worst. Perhaps there's more going on here than a simple miscommunication." I looked around and saw them then. Security cameras in every corner of the room, their red lights blinking. She'd been recording this entire interaction. My panicked arrival, my aggressive tone, my erratic behavior. She was building her case piece by piece, and I'd just handed her more ammunition. "Come on, Leo, we're leaving." I took his hand and headed for the door. "Of course," Eleanor said sweetly. "Though I'll be speaking with Mark about this incident, and perhaps with some professionals who specialize in parental fitness evaluations. For Leo's sake, you understand." The drive home was silent except for Leo's occasional sniffles. When we got back to our apartment, I locked the door, checked every window, and called the only person I could think of who might actually help me. Jessica Chen had been my closest friend since college, and she was now a family law attorney with a sharp mind and a protective streak a mile wide. "Jess, I need help." As soon as I heard her voice, everything came pouring out. The Brooch incident, the packages, the fake emergency pickup, all of it. Sarah listened to me carefully. Jessica's voice was serious in a way I'd never heard before. "Eleanor is building a case against you. Every one of those incidents you described, she's been creating documentation that you're unstable, a danger to Leo, that she's the concerned grandmother trying to help. The security footage she just got of you at her house, that'll show a mother acting hysterical and aggressive. She's smart and she's playing the long game." What do I do? First, we document everything, every interaction, every gift, every phone call. Second, we need to see if we can get a temporary restraining order. And third, we need to be prepared for her to escalate. People like Eleanor, they don't stop until they win or until they're forced to stop. You hurt her pride when you threw her out of your house. She's going to come after you with everything she has. Jessica was right. 3 days later, I was served with papers. Eleanor was suing for emergency temporary custody of Leo, claiming that I was mentally unstable, had been abusing prescription medication since the divorce, and had created an unsafe environment for my son. The filing included the security footage from her house, statements from Mark claiming I'd been increasingly erratic, the incident report the school had filed about the confusion over the emergency pickup, and even affidavits from some of Eleanor's society friends who'd apparently heard her tearfully express concern about her troubled daughter-in-law. I read through the papers with mounting horror. Every moment of genuine emotion, every instance where I'd tried to stand up for myself or protect my son, had been twisted into evidence of instability. The medications she referenced. A low-dose antidepressant my doctor had prescribed after the divorce to help with the stress and insomnia. Completely standard, completely legal, but Eleanor had made it sound like I was a drug addict. The court date was set for 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prove that I wasn't the monster she was painting me as. 3 weeks to somehow fight back against a woman with unlimited resources, community standing, and a talent for manipulation that bordered on supernatural. Jessica filed our response and a counterpetition for a restraining order detailing the Brooch incident and the unauthorized school pickup. But when we went before the judge for the initial hearing, Eleanor's lawyers came prepared. They brought a child psychologist who'd never met Leo, but who testified that sudden changes in parental behavior could be traumatizing. They brought character witnesses who spoke about Eleanor's dedication to child welfare through her charity work. They brought Mark, who testified that I'd become increasingly hostile toward his family and had alienated Leo from his father's side. I sat there in that courtroom, watching my life be dismantled by lies and half-truths, and felt utterly powerless. The judge didn't grant Eleanor custody, but he did order a full evaluation and appointed a guardian ad litem to represent Leo's interests. He also granted supervised visitation between Eleanor and Leo to take place at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor so that the child can maintain important family relationships during this difficult time. The words felt like a physical blow. Even with everything she'd done, the system was siding with her, or at least not fully siding with me. After the hearing, as Eleanor walked past me in the courthouse hallway, she leaned in close enough that only I could hear. "Family is everything, Sarah. I told you that. And family doesn't abandon family, but you did. You left my son. You took my grandson, and now you'll learn what it costs to cross Eleanor Brooks." That night, alone in my apartment after putting a frightened Leo to bed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out an old cardboard box from the very back, hidden under winter coats and forgotten shoes. It was taped shut, covered in dust, labeled simply, "Old Papers," in my handwriting from years ago. I'd packed this box the day after my wedding, taking everything from my childhood bedroom at my father's house and sealing it away, telling myself I was starting fresh, that the past didn't matter anymore. Now I sat on my bedroom floor, scissors in hand, and cut through the tape. Inside were the ghosts of my childhood. School papers and report cards, photos of birthday parties with my father's sad smile in the background, a dried corsage from my senior prom. And underneath all of that, the evidence I'd been too afraid to ever use. Medical records from my pediatrician. The notes were clinical, detached, listing injuries with cold precision. Patient presents with contusion on left upper arm, states she fell downstairs. Patient presents with sprained wrist, mother reports playground accident. Patient presents with bruised ribs, states she fell off bicycle. The dates spanned my entire childhood, a steady drumbeat of accidents that any reasonable person should have questioned. But my pediatrician had been one of Eleanor's bridge partners, and Eleanor had always been there at those appointments, perfectly dressed, perfectly concerned, with perfectly reasonable explanations. Beneath the medical records were my old diaries, the cheap notebooks with pop stars on the covers that teenage me had filled with the truth I couldn't speak out loud. I opened one at random and saw my own handwriting, younger and rounder, but still recognizable. She did it again today. I forgot to fold the towels her way, and she grabbed my arm so hard I have finger marks. She said I'm useless, that I ruin everything, that Dad only stays with her because of me, and he'd be happier if I'd never been born. Then she made me dinner and sat there smiling while I ate like nothing happened. I don't understand how she can be two different people. Page after page of the same pattern. Violence followed by normalcy. Cruelty followed by public displays of maternal devotion. A masterclass in psychological torture documented in teenage purple ink. But the most damning piece was at the very bottom of the box, a letter yellowed with age in my father's careful handwriting. It was addressed to his sister, my Aunt Linda, dated just 2 months before he died of a massive heart attack when I was 17. "Linda," it began, "I'm writing this because I need someone to know the truth, and I'm too much of a coward to say it out loud. Eleanor has made our lives hell for 20 years. Sarah doesn't know I know about the bruises, the verbal abuse, the way Eleanor systematically destroys any bit of confidence she has. I've tried to protect her, to buffer her from the worst of it, but I'm not strong enough. Eleanor is relentless, and she's broken me down until I'm barely a person anymore. My doctor says my blood pressure is dangerously high, that the stress is literally killing me. He's not wrong. If something happens to me, please look after Sarah. Don't let Eleanor convince her that the abuse was love. Don't let her believe she deserved it. She's a good girl, Linda. She deserves so much better than what we've given her." My father had never sent the letter. He died at his desk at work, papers spread around him. His heart finally giving out under the weight of living with Eleanor Brooks. And I'd spent the funeral accepting condolences from people who told me how lucky I was to have such a strong mother to lean on in my grief. I read that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, before I finally let myself feel the full weight of what it meant. My father had known. He'd seen what Eleanor was doing to me, and he'd been too beaten down to stop it. And now she was doing the same thing to my son, and I'd almost been too beaten down to fight back too. But I had something my father never had. I had proof, I had documentation, and I had Jessica. The next morning, I brought the box to Jessica's office. She went through everything methodically, taking notes, occasionally looking up at me with an expression that mixed pity and fury. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "This changes everything. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Why didn't you ever tell me about this? About what she did to you as a child?" Because I'd convinced myself it wasn't that bad. That I'd exaggerated it in my memory. That maybe I had been a difficult child and deserved it. Eleanor is very good at making you believe that your reality isn't real. I wiped my eyes. And because I was ashamed, who lets their mother abuse them for 18 years and never tells anyone? "A child," Jessica said firmly. "A child who is being abused lets it happen because children don't have power. But you're not a child anymore, and we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly who Eleanor Brooks really is." Over the next week, Jessica worked 18-hour days building our case. She tracked down my Aunt Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in years, and convinced her to come testify. Linda was my father's younger sister, and she'd been the one he'd wanted to send that letter to. When Jessica showed it to her, she broke down crying. I knew something was wrong, Linda said. Your father changed so much after he married Eleanor. He used to be so full of life, and then he just got quieter and quieter, like she was dimming his light bit by bit. And at family gatherings, I'd see the way she'd look at you like you were an inconvenience. But I didn't know how bad it was. I should have done something. I should have said something. You can say something now, Jessica told her gently. We also tracked down my old pediatrician, Dr. Morrison, who is now retired. Jessica requested my complete medical file, including the doctor's personal notes. What we found was chilling. Dr. Morrison had noted his concerns about the pattern of injuries, but Eleanor's social standing and his own relationship with her had made him hesitant to report. He documented his suspicions, though, in notes that were never meant to see the light of day. Mother's explanations increasingly implausible. Consider mandatory reporting, but concerned about professional repercussions given Mother's position in community. The final piece of evidence was something I'd forgotten I even had. My mother had a habit of recording family events on cassette tapes back before video cameras were common in every home. She'd recorded Christmas mornings, birthday parties, random dinner conversations. I'd found a box of them when I cleaned out her house after the funeral, but I'd never listened to them. Jessica and I spent an entire night going through those tapes, fast-forwarding through hours of mundane family sounds, looking for anything useful. We found it on a tape labeled Sarah's 16th birthday. The party sounds were normal at first. People talking, someone laughing, the sound of gift wrap being torn. And then, clear as day, Eleanor's voice in another room, not realizing the tape was still recording. You're pathetic, Sarah. Look at you, 16 years old and still acting like a child. You embarrassed me in front of my friends with that ridiculous outfit. Do you have any idea how it reflects on me when my daughter looks like trash? The sound of something hitting something else, then my own voice, younger and shaking, saying, I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to. Eleanor again. You never mean to. You're a walking disappointment. Your father knows it too, he's just too weak to say it. Jessica stopped the tape. That's enough. We have her. The custody hearing was rescheduled to accommodate all our new evidence and witnesses. As the date approached, Eleanor's lawyers tried everything to get our evidence excluded. They argued that the childhood abuse was irrelevant to current custody issues. They claimed the medical records were too old to be meaningful. They suggested that my diaries were unreliable teenage dramatics. But Jessica had been smart in how she framed everything. This wasn't just about what Eleanor had done to me. It was about establishing a pattern of behavior that put Leo at risk. She'd already hurt him once with the brooch. She'd already shown she was willing to manipulate situations to get what she wanted. And the evidence showed that this was who Eleanor had always been, a woman who hurt the vulnerable, and then convinced everyone that she was actually the hero of the story. The courtroom was packed the day of the final hearing. Eleanor had brought her entire social circle, women in expensive suits and perfect hair, there to show support for their friend. But we had Linda, and we had the truth. Jessica started slowly, methodically. She presented the medical records, letting the judge see the pattern of injuries. She called Linda to the stand, and my aunt told the story of my father's letter, of her own suspicions of the family gatherings, where Eleanor would be sweet as pie in public and cruel when she thought no one was watching. Then Jessica played the tape. In that quiet courtroom, with everyone leaning forward to hear, Eleanor's voice filled the space. The contempt, the cruelty, the absolute venom in her words was unmistakable. I watched Eleanor's face as she heard her own voice, saw the mask slip for just a moment, saw the rage underneath before she composed herself. But Jessica wasn't done. She brought up Dr. Morrison's notes, reading his concerns out loud. Pattern consistent with abuse. Mother's explanations increasingly implausible. She showed photos of the scar on Leo's arm from the brooch incident. She presented the timeline of harassment after I'd thrown Eleanor out of my house. And then she asked the question that brought everything into focus. Mrs. Brooks, your granddaughter Sarah seems to have been quite accident-prone as a child. According to these medical records, she fell downstairs 3 times in 1 year. She had repeated wrist injuries, multiple bruises, even a cracked rib from supposedly falling off a bicycle. Do you find that pattern unusual? Eleanor's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. Eleanor sat up straighter in the witness box, her face a mask of composure, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Children have accidents. Sarah was always rather clumsy. Clumsy enough to injure herself 36 times over the course of her childhood. Clumsy enough that her own father wrote a letter detailing his concerns about your treatment of her. Jessica held up the letter. Mr. Brooks wrote that your behavior was, and I quote, systematic destruction of any confidence Sarah has. He said the stress of living with you was literally killing him. Does that sound like normal parental discipline to you? My husband was a weak man who didn't understand that children need structure and consequences. If he'd been stronger, Sarah might have turned out better. The words were out of Eleanor's mouth before she could stop them, and the moment she realized what she'd said, I saw fear flash across her face. So you admit that you implemented harsh consequences on your daughter. I disciplined her when necessary, as any good parent does. With a belt, with your hands, with whatever object was convenient. Jessica's voice was sharp now. The way you disciplined your grandson with your brooch when he failed to address you properly. That was an accident. An accident that required medical attention. An accident that left a scar. Just like all of Sarah's childhood accidents. Jessica turned to the judge. Your Honor, we're not here to relitigate Sarah's childhood, though God knows someone should have intervened decades ago. We're here because this pattern of behavior, this need for control, and this willingness to use physical and psychological abuse to maintain it, puts Leo at risk. Eleanor Brooks hurt him once already. She terrorized his mother with packages and harassment. She lied to school officials to take him without permission. She has shown repeatedly that she believes the rules don't apply to her and that anyone who defies her deserves punishment. A child cannot be safe in her care. The judge asked Eleanor to step down. He reviewed the evidence in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Brooks, I find the evidence presented here deeply troubling. The pattern of childhood injuries, your own admission of harsh discipline. The recorded evidence of verbal abuse and the recent incident with your grandson all paint a picture of someone who uses control and intimidation to maintain family relationships. This court's primary concern is the welfare of the child, and I cannot in good conscience grant you custody or even unsupervised visitation. Eleanor stood up, her composure finally cracking. Your Honor, this is absurd. I am a respected member of this community. I sit on the school board. I've dedicated my life to children's welfare. You've dedicated your life to your own image, the judge interrupted. And the gap between that image and reality as demonstrated by this evidence is vast. I am granting Sarah Henderson full custody of her son with a permanent restraining order, preventing you from coming within 500 yards of either Sarah or Leo. This order extends to all forms of contact, including electronic and telephone communication. Should you violate this order, you will face criminal charges. The courtroom erupted. Eleanor's friends gasped and whispered. Mark jumped to his feet, yelling that this was a travesty. But I just sat there, Jessica's hand squeezing mine, and let the relief wash over me. Eleanor turned to look at me as the bailiff escorted her from the courtroom, and the look in her eyes was pure hatred. But for the first time in my life, I looked back at her without fear. She didn't have power over me anymore. She never would again. The aftermath was swift and brutal, at least for Eleanor. The local newspaper got hold of the court records, and suddenly everyone knew that the woman who'd been preaching family values and child welfare was an abuser. Her position on the school board was terminated immediately. The charity organizations she'd chaired quietly asked her to step down. Her social circle, built on appearance and respectability, crumbled as people distanced themselves from the scandal. Mark filed for divorce from Jennifer 2 months later, though. Whether that was related to his mother's downfall or just his own inability to maintain any relationship, I never found out. He was granted supervised visitation with Leo, with strict orders that Eleanor was never to be present. For my part, I took Leo and moved 3 hours away to a small town where nobody knew Eleanor Brooks or her reputation. I used the small inheritance from my father to make a down payment on a house with a big backyard and windows that let in lots of light. I found a new job with a marketing firm that actually valued my work. And slowly, carefully, Leo and I started to heal. It wasn't instant. Leo had nightmares for months. He'd panic if I was late picking him up from school. He'd flinch at sudden movements. We did therapy, both individual and together, working through the trauma of what he'd experienced and what he'd witnessed. But gradually I watched my son come back to himself. His laugh got easier, his smiles more frequent. He stopped looking over his shoulder every time we went outside. About 6 months after we moved on, a Saturday afternoon, while Leo was playing on the swing set I'd installed in our backyard, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Something made me answer. Sarah. Eleanor's voice was different than I remembered. Older, shakier, stripped of its usual commanding tone. Sarah, it's your mother. I wanted to talk to you, to explain. I watched Leo swing higher and higher, his hair catching the sunlight, his laughter carrying on the breeze. I thought about answering her. I thought about all the things I could say, all the anger I still carried, all the ways she damaged me and tried to damage my son. Instead, I hung up. Then I blocked the number, added it to the long list of blocked numbers that included all her various phones and friends who'd tried to reach me on her behalf. Leo called out, Mom, watch this, and did a jump off the swing that sent him tumbling into the grass. He popped up laughing, grass stains on his knees, completely fine. That was awesome, buddy. Be careful though, okay? I will. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Absolutely. I sat down on the back porch steps and watched my son play, really play without fear or anxiety. And I thought about Eleanor's words from that day in my apartment, the day she'd cut Leo with her brooch. Family is everything, she'd said like it was a threat. She was wrong. Family isn't everything. Safety is everything. Love is everything. Peace is everything. And sometimes the family you're born into isn't family at all. Sometimes family is the life you build for yourself and the people you choose to protect. I'd spent my childhood believing I deserved Eleanor's cruelty. I'd spent my marriage believing I needed to earn her approval. I'd almost spent my son's childhood believing she had the right to terrorize us both. But that day in court when the judge read his ruling, I'd finally learned the truth. Eleanor had no power except what I gave her, and I was done giving. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting her off so completely. They ask if I feel guilty about the restraining order, about moving away, about depriving Leo of his grandmother. I tell them the truth. I regret that I didn't do it sooner. Leo is 8 now. The scar on his arm has faded to almost nothing. He doesn't remember much about Eleanor, just vague impressions of someone who scared him. He has friends, a teacher who loves him, a mother who would burn the world down to keep him safe. And that's enough. That's everything. Family is not the people who hurt you and call it love. Family is not obligation or blood or guilt. Family is the peace you feel when you walk in your door at the end of the day. Family is the laughter of a child who isn't afraid anymore. Family is knowing that you're enough exactly as you are, without having to earn it. Eleanor Brooks taught me a lot of things, though none of them were what she intended. She taught me that appearances are meaningless. She taught me that community respect and real decency are not the same thing. She taught me that some people are broken in ways that can never be fixed, and that trying to love them only breaks you too. But most importantly, she taught me by being the worst possible example what a mother should never be. And in learning that I became the mother I needed to be for Leo, the mother my father wished he could have protected me from needing, the mother who knows that love is not control, that family is not ownership, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. So that's my answer to Eleanor's question from that terrible day. She asked if I thought I could raise Leo alone. And the answer is yes. Yes, I can, and more than that, I should. Because alone with me, he's safer than he ever would have been with her in our lives. The sun is setting now, painting our backyard in shades of gold and orange. Leo has abandoned the swing set and is lying in the grass, making shapes out of clouds. I'll call him in soon for dinner, and we'll sit at our small kitchen table and talk about his day, and there won't be any walking on eggshells or watching what we say. There will just be us, messy and imperfect and free. And that's worth more than all of Eleanor's respectability and all of her community standing and all of her perfectly curated image combined. That's real family. That's real love. And that's the legacy I'm choosing to pass down to my son. Not generational trauma, not cycles of abuse, not the desperate need to control and dominate. Just safety, just peace, just the knowledge that he's loved exactly as he is. Eleanor called that family, but she was wrong about that too. This is family. Everything else is just biology. Have you ever had to make the impossible choice between keeping the peace and protecting the people you love? Have you ever looked at someone everyone else respected and seen the monster underneath? Drop a comment and tell me your story. And if this resonated with you, if you've ever had to walk away from toxic family to save yourself, hit that like button and subscribe. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is close the door on people who hurt us, no matter what anyone else thinks. And sometimes that's not giving up on family. That's finally understanding what family should have been all along.